3 years ago, news broke that the Saudi royal family would have a new heir to the throne. In a shocking video, then Crown Prince Mohammad bin Nayef was seen accepting that his title would pass to the king's son, Mohammad bin Salman. The young prince, then just 31, has since led his country down a troubling path. He has overseen confrontation with the country's neighbors, a disastrous war in Yemen, and the brutal assassination of dissident Jamal Khashoggi that has tarnished his carefully crafted image. But who is MBS, as he is known in most of the world? What is the driving force behind his governing style? Let's take a look at this report. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us from London is Ghanem al Dosari. He is a Saudi human rights activist and political satirist. And Andreas Krieg, a lecturer at the School of Security Studies at King's College in London. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, MBS, has continued to dominate the news headlines in recent weeks following reports of crackdown against royals, officials and dissidents abroad. So our guest, Ghanem al Dosari, is not the only exiled dissident allegedly under threat by the Saudi government. One dissident based in Canada is Omar Abdulaziz, a 26-year-old Saudi vlogger and political activist who had close ties to murdered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Abdulaziz says he recently received a warning by Canadian authorities that he, too, could be a potential target of the Saudi royal family. Canadian intelligence said it also has evidence to suggest that Abdulaziz's phone was hacked in the lead-up to Khashoggi's murder when the two men were in regular contact. In a recent video on Twitter, the activist said Mohammed bin Salman and his people want to harm me. They want to do something against me, but I don't know if it is an assassination or a kidnapping. I don't know, but it's something that is definitely not right. So, Ghanem, can you speak on the dangers of being a Saudi dissident abroad?
Well, anyone will speak up against the Saudi regime will become a target. We recently heard about Omar the threat to his safety. I was threatened before him, and Jamal was targeted and killed in Saudi consulate in Turkey. So this is not something new that the Saudi government will target anyone who speak up against them. But the only thing is different is how far are they willing to go? Because previously we haven't heard that they committed this heinous crimes in Europeans or soil or in America or somewhere else. But right now, under MBS leadership, I think they are willing to do anything to anyone who speak up his mind
Are you
against them.
worried that he'll come after you, for example, in London?
Well, I've been under police protection for almost 2 years and a half right now. And the threat, I could only assume it's coming from Saudi Arabia. So, of course, everyone speak up their mind against MBS. Should be worried and should be looking after their over their shoulders.
All right. So, Andreas, why the MBS is tightening his grip on his opponents? To which extent these people pose a threat to his rule? Are they too dangerous?
No, I mean, we have to understand that Saudi is an immense crisis at the moment. Most importantly, the COVID-19 has hit the Saudi kingdom worse than any other Gulf state. So economically, the crisis is a lot worse than we initially thought. It comes on top of an existing oil price crisis that puts a lot of strain on the kingdom. And amidst all of that, MBS was actually trying for a long time to set everything straight for his political transition. We were expecting a political transition in the kingdom to happen over Ramadan or this summer before the G20 summit. So there's a lot of pressure internally. And obviously that political transition is something that comes at a time when in the Allegiance Council and within the wider royal family, MBS's position is not entirely clear and tolerated. So there's still a lot of opposition towards him. And obviously, internally in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of discourse about him, which is negative, at least in private and other circles. So,
I was going to ask that how would his rule be impacted if the MBS continued to sideline his traditional partners or lost all the support by the tribal leaders? Can he survive, and why is he sidelining those traditional components of this kingdom?
Yes, this is the very first time that, Saudi has never been a democracy and has always been somewhat autocratic, but there has been power sharing within the family. And this has now been somewhat sidelined for the last 2 years at least. And obviously the pressure is on. Loads of those people who oppose his lineage and the lineage of Salman have now been sidelined. People affiliated with them, even overseas, have been sidelined. The families have been pressured. So that kind of shows us there is a lot of internal pressure on him and a lot of phobia and paranoia that, people might not stick with him and might potentially make a move if King Salman actually dies, because it's very important to highlight the king is very important.
Yeah, despite his ailing health, experts argue that the king still has some sort of control over his son, and he is the one who keeps this kingdom relatively peaceful and intact. So, Ghanem, what happens when the king dies? What's next for the kingdom, and for how much longer can King Salman shield his son?
Well, as long as King Salman is alive, MBS will be fine. But when he dies, and we know that he's a very old man and he could die any moment, when he dies, I think there will be a war between the royal family themselves. Each one wanted to assume power, and I don't think MBS will survive after his father's death. Let's not forget that MBS himself right now is not welcomed in the Western world after he killed Jamal Khashoggi, and we saw the statement, that the report that came from CIA that he's involved in his killing, which we all know. Then he's not welcomed, and if he doesn't have international support and he loses his father, I think he will end up in prison or being. Yeah.
Andreas, you've just mentioned the economic difficulties the kingdom has been facing, both from the coronavirus and the contraction of oil prices. So he has promised employment, growing private sector, and foreign investment. Do you believe that he'll be able to deliver on his promises? And how will this Vision 2030 play out, in your opinion?
Well, I think he has delivered on some things. So in terms of social liberalization, some things have moved in the right direction, and that needs to be acknowledged. However, as a leader, he is very impulsive. He has a lack of strategic foresight. He has invested loads of money, mostly overseas, not internally, which obviously helps the Saudi wealth fund, but it doesn't help the domestic economy. Most analysts are very, very, pessimistic when they look at Agenda 2030 as something that can actually be realized, considering that the direct foreign investment in Saudi Arabia is at an absolute low, has been for a while. None of the targets that were set were actually met. The idea of setting up a new city, NEOM, is also something that has not been realizable. Much of it has been put on hold because of the oil price crisis. So macroeconomically, Saudi is in a very, very dire situation. Privatization is obviously hampered by the fact as well that the Saudi government will tighten its belt and will not continue spending in investing in the domestic economy. So what most analysts are saying now is let the sovereign wealth fund invest domestically rather than abroad, rather than investing in companies in India, China, or into football clubs in the United Kingdom, for example. Let them invest domestically to actually boost the economy. That has not happened.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you for joining us on Straight Talk. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.